Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something really unexpected. We're going to unpack a genuinely fascinating handwritten manuscript that takes a hard look at Christian apologetics, but it does so through a pretty surprising philosophical lens, the lens of love. Now, whether you've studied theology for years or you're just kind of curious about how ancient texts get interpreted, this analysis offers a really fresh, highly structured perspective on a super famous passage.
Here's the roadmap for today. First, the apologist's Achilles heel. Second, the necessity of love. Third, the properties of love. Fourth, the enemy of selfishness. And finally, why the greatest is love.
All right, part one, the apologist's Achilles heel.
Jumping right into the core struggle, the author starts with a really massive swing in this section of the manuscript. They argue that defending the faith, Christian apologetics, is just incredibly tough. But wait, it's not because you have to answer complex, heady questions about metaphysics or morality. Nope. The author actually writes that it's difficult because of and this is a direct quote, pathetically narrowed down concept of Jesus' definition of love. Wow, that is a punchy phrase right out of the gate, isn't it? Basically, the argument here is that the intellectual stuff isn't the real weak point. The actual weak point is how the core virtue of the faith is understood and lived out on a daily basis.
And that brings us to a seriously uncomfortable question. The manuscript asks, are we Christians hypocrites in the most profound sense? Are we idealistic in presenting the God of love when we ourselves find it so hard to love others? So, this forces us to stop and think. It challenges this whole idea. Are believers painting this grand picture of a loving God, but totally dropping the ball on loving the actual people right in front of them? And why does this matter to us? Well, it highlights that all the clever intellectual arguments in the world will just fall completely flat if the lived reality doesn't match up with the theory.
Moving on to part 2, the necessity of love, specifically looking at 1 Corinthians 13, verses 1 through 3.
So, to figure out this dilemma, the author turns to the Apostle Paul's letters and uses this absolutely wild auditory metaphor. Picture someone who has the most amazing gifts imaginable, like they can fluently speak every single language on the planet. The manuscript argues that if this person is speaking without love, it's literally just empty noise. It's totally unharmonious, useless sound. The author even goes so far as to compare a loveless Christianity to an endless, monotonous series of Gregorian chants. Just drone, 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 right? But contrast that with speaking with love, and suddenly it's a beautiful classical symphony. It's just such a brilliant way to visualize, or I guess audiolize, how absolutely crucial our underlying motivation is. Without love, even the most impressive intellectual display is just static.
Okay, part 3. The properties of love, drawn from verses 4 through 7. Now, moving away from all those high-level abstract ideas, the author gets super practical. They actually create a meticulous numbered list to break down what this text looks like in the real world. Because love isn't just a warm, fuzzy feeling, right? It's a highly specific set of behaviors. The author groups these traits logically to show how true love actually operates. First up, long-suffering. This means enduring evil and provocation without holding on to resentment or seeking revenge. It's not quick to just demand its own way. Next, it's kind. This isn't passive. It means actively going out and hunting for opportunities to do good. Third, not envious. It's not grieved when good things happen to other people. I mean, if your mind is truly bent on doing good, you can't possibly wish ill on someone else. And finally, not arrogant. It doesn't fish for compliments or try to win applause. True love builds up our brothers and sisters, which naturally sort of lowers our own ego. It is a really rigorous, challenging standard to live by.
Which leads us perfectly into part 4, the enemy of selfishness.
Diving a bit deeper here, the text defines love as the, quote, utter enemy of selfishness. Now, to be fair, the author is careful to point out that a reasonable amount of self-love is totally natural. The golden rule is love thy neighbor as thyself, after all. You got to have a baseline of self-care. But true love, according to this manuscript, constantly puts its own needs on the back burner for the sake of others. And because it's completely unselfish, it isn't easily provoked. I absolutely love this phrase the author uses. They note that where the fire of love is kept, the flames of wrath will not easily kindle. Basically, anger just cannot survive in a heart where love is in charge.
All right, let's head into our final section, part 5, the greatest is love, looking at verse 13.
So, we've outlined the problem and broken down the practical steps, and now in the final pages of the document, the author's writing gets noticeably more passionate as they reach the climax of the argument. The famous verse says that faith, hope, and love remain, but the greatest of these is love. And the author logically lays out exactly why love outlasts and outranks those other two primary virtues.
This brilliantly illustrates the hierarchy they mapped out. Think of it like this. Faith is an action that joins on to divine revelation. It's about believing what is revealed to us. Hope fastens on to future felicity. It's eagerly waiting for what's coming next. But love, the manuscript states that love fastens on the divine perfections themselves. So, while faith and hope are totally anchored in what has been revealed or what is promised for the future, love plugs directly into perfection itself. And because of that direct connection, the author argues love is the only one that will last into the next world. Because eventually, faith and hope won't be needed anymore. The promises will have already been fulfilled.
The manuscript actually pauses right here to ask this specific question. In what sense is love greater than faith? And it acknowledges a bit of a paradox. According to the text, faith is the root. It's the core belief that allows Christ to dwell in the heart to begin with. But the author concludes that while faith is the internal engine, love is the ultimate outward realization of it. You can have the root, sure, but the entire point of planting a root is to eventually produce the fruit, right?
And we're going to leave you with this exact punchy takeaway from the very end of the manuscript. Faith saves ourselves, but love benefits others. Boom! It just perfectly circles back to that initial Achilles heel problem we started with. If apologetics only focuses on the internal stuff, the faith that saves oneself, well, it's going to look pretty hypocritical to the outside world. It's just going to sound like that droning Gregorian chant again. This explainer leaves us with a really deep philosophical question. We need to seriously consider who is actually benefiting from our beliefs versus our actions. If the absolute greatest virtue is the one that serves others, how does that totally shift the way we argue, defend, and live out our values today? Think on that for a bit. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive.